Yeah, a couple of you, okay. I'm a decent athlete. I can snow ski, but you know what doesn't make a good snow skier? Someone who does not fluidly transition and just like let it go on a mountain coming straight downhill. I just need y'all to know I grew up in North Carolina. I went skiing for the first time in the mountains of North Carolina on fake snow with people who come to the ski slopes in jeans and flannel shirts. My first memory of snow skiing is going down a hill in Boone, North Carolina. And there are people coming down beside us. English was not their first language. They had on jeans and a flannel shirt, and their ski poles were sticking straight out, and they were going, "No brakes, no brakes." And I was like, this is how someone dies. I was like 8 years old, and I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever done. But Chris, I grew up and started dating and got engaged to Chris, and this is like his thing. He snow skis for fun. I just want to let y'all know that I don't typically do things that I won't be like immediately good at. Like if I'm not going to be the best, it's just not probably going to be my thing. And I knew early on that I probably wasn't going to go to the Olympics in snow skiing, so I just wasn't real interested in it. And then Chris is like, "We're engaged, let's go skiing in Colorado." So I went along, and I love like the green easy hills where part of it you're like actually having to work and snow ski down the hill. And Chris likes black diamonds, and like I don't do that. Anyway, all I'm saying is that gliding gently down a hill easily and letting my legs like bend with the bumps and not like tensing up during those moments when you can't completely control things, well, let's just say this isn't my style. So when I went snow skiing with him, I fought it all day. It's like 15 degrees outside. I'm sweating just thinking about it. I was sweating and exhausted because I'd like skied the whole day like this. And Chris looked at me and he said, "Erica, this is your chance." I'm like, "My chance for what?" He said, "Ski down this hill like you want to live your life. Just go with the flow and have fun." I looked at him and I said, "Breaking my leg is not how I want to live my life." But I got off the chairlift. We were like sitting on the chairlift. I think he wanted like this sweet moment of him giving me this profound advice. But I got off the ski lift and I tried the mountain a few more times. I thought with every turn going down the hill, just go with the flow, have fun. Go with the flow, have fun. Like tense like that, just going back and forth down the hill. Go with the flow, have fun. And I was like angry with Chris, so he got down to the bottom first, and I was like, "Get on that chairlift and leave me alone. Like, you go down the hill by yourself." And I got on the chairlift. It was just me by myself in the mountains with snow all around. And I realized that maybe Chris was right. Maybe I live my life about like I snow ski, tensing up during every transition, fighting every turn, trying to control my life and having zero fun and living exhausted and sweaty while doing it. And in that quiet and cold, I decided that I had lived frozen in an ice tomb for too long. I realized that this way of living steals all of your freedom, steals all of your fun, and it stifles your growth. Maybe you feel like this too in some area of your life. Maybe your mindset that you started 2025 with is trapping you in an icy tomb. How is your mindset doing that to you? Are you ready to break out of this icy tomb that you have lived in for too long and experience the fullness of freedom, the fullness of life here and now? In 2025, God led us to a verse, Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. Have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Can I tell y'all how Jesus didn't live in the world? He was not frozen in a pitcher of ice, living in a tomb, afraid to know or trying to control every move that's next. And what is holding many of us back from flourishing into that purpose that God has for you is that we are frozen in a mindset that does not align with the freedom and fullness of life in Christ Jesus. Your mindset, right? We talked about this last time. Your mindset is the direction that you are headed in life. It is the direction of your mind that determines how you interpret and respond to life. It sets the direction for your life. Your mindset, it sets the direction for your life. Our mindset takes us somewhere. And sometimes that somewhere is nowhere. Where is your mindset taking you? Jesus demonstrates that with God's power, you can break out of the icy tomb. You can break out of a frozen way of thinking, that you can actually embrace flexibility. And that embracing a flexible mindset actually gives you the freedom to live life fully free right here and right now. The mindset of Jesus is to be fully present right where you are, and let that lead you to the purpose that God has for you. This is not God's vision for your mindset. This is not God's vision for your life. If you live in Florida and you like this cold weather, y'all are wild, but this is not God's dream for our lives. Let's look at the Bible and study a time when Jesus made this really clear. So if you have your Bibles and want to turn to Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, it says this: "At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, 'Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath.'" Let's just break down a few of the things that are in these first two verses. The Sabbath. It's a day set aside for rest and worship, as commanded in the 10 Commandments. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11, if you're interested in looking it up. Work was strictly prohibited. And over time, religious leaders developed all of these detailed rules about what was considered work and what was not considered work. Harvesting, threshing, and preparing food was work. By picking and eating grain, the Pharisees were accusing the disciples, the followers of Jesus, for doing work and breaking these additional rules on the Sabbath. The next slide. The disciples, you're right, the disciples are walking through grain fields, these are the followers of Jesus. They're picking heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands to remove the husk, and then eating the kernels like popcorn kernels. This is considered work by the Pharisees, okay? Now, the Pharisees, does anybody know who the Pharisees are? They're a religious sect of people who strictly adhere to the Torah, strictly. They follow every single rule to the T. They believe their job is to guard and protect this tradition. They held great religious authority. People listened to them. They believed what they said, and they followed what they were doing, and they had a great conflict with Jesus. So when Jesus is teaching or trying to lead people, they were extremely conflicted with what it was that he was saying. So Jesus shows us in these first two verses what rigid thinking looks like, right? When you're hungry, you don't eat? Like, what is this talking about? So Jesus shows us what rigid thinking looks like. It's judgment and not understanding. Did y'all hear how the Pharisees greeted them? They're like literally coming out of the field, eating these kernels and husks. Like that, it's not a lovely snack, let's be honest. And as soon as they get out of the field, what do the Pharisees say? Not, "Hi, how are you doing? You must be hungry. Let me hear about your day." What do they say? "What you're doing is wrong." That's how they greet them. Jesus shows us that meeting people with judgment and not understanding is painful. These guys were eating raw grain out of a field that belongs to someone else on a long, hot day. Something is wrong with them, the Pharisees said. "What is wrong with you for eating on the Sabbath? Humans should never be hungry, right? We should just follow the rules. We should never want anything to eat." And this rigid way of thinking not only judges and doesn't understand, it neglects people. We see problems and not people when we begin to think and follow the rules so closely. Our focus becomes the problem. It becomes that work assignment that's due on Wednesday, and we miss the fact that it's a human who needs to complete the work assignment, right? We do this every day. These folks are hungry. These disciples are hungry, and they're worn out. And the problem is that they can't get, they're not doing what the Pharisees think they want to. It neglects people. Living in this rigid, frozen way of thinking prevents grace and forgiveness. Because no one has time to share their story or their pain. No one cared that the disciples were hungry. No one cared that they were tired. No one cared about their story. There was no time for grace or forgiveness. All growth and creativity was stifled because following the rule literally meant they couldn't eat food to nourish their souls and their spirits. It bred an environment of fear and not trust. When you are hungry and you live anxious for your next meal, you're scared. You're not trusting or hopeful about the future. And this isn't just what the Pharisees did. It's what we do too. This is what we do. When your spouse walks through the door, do you greet them warmly? How's your day at work? Or do you say the laundry, supper, kids, all the things? When you look at yourself in the mirror, do you see someone who needs grace and forgiveness, space to grow and be creative? Or do you see all the problems? When you supervise an employee, how is it that you're handling that? Do you show judgment or understanding? Do you see them as a person, as a human, as a person created in the image of God? Do you see your relationship as an opportunity to spread grace and forgiveness? Do you see your job as a disciple, as a follower of Jesus, to be to encourage creativity and growth? Do you want people to be trusting and hopeful, or do you continue to contribute to fear? See, this kind of mindset, when we look at problems and rules, and it's got to be this way, it freezes all the wrong things in place. Judgment, problems, not being people-centered, stifling growth and creativity, all of those things are frozen in place. But the flexible mindset of Jesus prioritizes relationships over rules. It embraces grace. It recognizes that people are imperfect and they need love, not just correction. Maybe they actually needed that grain that they were picking from the field. Who is somebody who might actually need some grace or some space or some love in your own life? How can you begin to recognize that people are sometimes imperfect and maybe they need love, not just correction or fitting into your box? How have you prioritized connection? Because Jesus prioritizes connection, right? He focuses on understanding the heart and needs of others before enforcing the rules. Jesus shows us to practice flexibility, right? Allow space for individuals from all kinds of different places or ways of doing things to be in relationship with you rather than having to follow exactly what it is we think they ought to do. And Jesus teaches us to value compassion, to follow Jesus' example of meeting people where they are instead of expecting them to be exactly where you are. Value compassion. By shifting from rules to relationships, individuals and communities can grow and break out of icy tombs that are holding us back. Let's read the rest of what happened. I want you to listen to what Jesus said. He answered the Pharisees who said, "Your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, the special set-apart bread. They ate it because they were hungry. It was not lawful for them to do. It was only lawful for the priests to eat that." And Jesus says, "Haven't you read in the law that the priests on Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath? They work. Priests are working on the Sabbath, and yet they are innocent. I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. Flexibility does not mean that we ignore the law. Jesus thinks that the Sabbath is important. In other places you see him rest all the time. It's a gift. But when we are not flexible, it means that we forget the purpose of what the rule is supposed to say in the first place. We forget that God's first and most important thing that God has offered us is compassion. God didn't give us rules. God didn't give us things so that we have to live in this perfect spot. God gave us rules and things in the Bible so that we could understand what it's like to live freely and fully exactly where we are in the midst of God's compassion. And Jesus, in this way of saying it back to the Pharisees, he redefines what it means to honor God. It doesn't mean living like this, frozen in time. If your relationship with Jesus looks just like it did 10 years ago this morning, then something's wrong. You've been living like this for too long. It will stifle your growth and creativity, and you'll never be free to move towards the place of flourishing. Jesus says mercy matters more than sacrifice, and when we offer mercy to the people around us, we grow and encounter the grace of God in ways that changes us, in ways that breaks us and other people out of frozen, icy tombs. How are we modeling God's grace in our everyday lives? What has frozen you in place? What is it that has kept you right here? Is it what you tell yourself? Is it how you look at the world? What does it look like to have a little more flexibility, to have a little more freedom? This week, I was really touched by the photos of folks risking their lives to fight the wildfires out in California. I was, these folks standing there and nothing but fire all around them, doing the best they could to protect their community, property, and the lives of people. All rules are out the window now, right? Relationships and preservation of people and property is what matters. I was touched by this because I realized people have had to literally break out of icy tombs and begin to operate in different ways. I was particularly touched by the number of incarcerated people who aren't given a hose to fight the fire, but who are given ground tools to dig holes and create some kind of barrier to contain these fires. These guys who have all kinds of stories. Y'all see that line? There's all kinds of stories. These guys stood in front of judges and they were told they were a problem. These guys stood in front of a cop and they were handcuffed and they were told that they were a problem. And then they get an opportunity. They get to voluntarily sign up to take a tool in their hand and protect the very community that put them behind bars. And I want y'all to look at what's in their hands, what's on their backs. When they were seen as people, when we kept not seeing them as people stuck in jail like they could never change, instead we saw these people as the humans that they are, getting to participate in preserving life and property, the will of God, literally helping other people flourish into the purpose. You know what these guys did? They said, yeah, hand me a shovel. Are there people back in the jails who didn't do this? Absolutely. But look at the number, 900 incarcerated men and women in California grabbed a shovel and are trying to make a difference in the world. Let me tell you something. If the world can begin to look at them different, if the world can begin to see them different, if they can begin to look in a mirror at night in a jail cell and see themselves as people who have worth and dignity and a reason to live, then you can. You can. You are not a problem. Jesus doesn't see you as a frozen person in an icy tomb. God sees you as a person with a mighty purpose. And God values a relationship with you. The only way you are going to get a flexible mindset is by having a relationship with God, by praying and reading the Bible, by letting God transform you from the inside out. And there are going to be moments where you are no longer a problem, but you are a solution to the problem. God has invited each of you this morning to let go of thinking you aren't good enough. Let go of thinking of all the rules you had to live to live up to being in His kingdom or a part of His kingdom or do it the way He said. God says stop. Break out of that icy tomb. Pick up a shovel and let's prevent things from destroying this world that we live in. I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready to say yes to that. I don't want to live. I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to finish with your challenge. Everybody always has a mindset challenge. Your mindset challenge this week is to simply pray. Each day this week, will you pray that God will reveal to you one way that a rigid and frozen mindset can change into one of flexibility and growth? Ask God to reveal to you what it is that's keeping the shovel out of your hand from fixing the problems that are destroying our world. Ask God what that problem is. And then I want you to put some mercy in action. I want you to engage in one merciful act this week. Do one thing that nobody may know about, but that offers mercy to somebody who may not experience it unless you do. The word mercy, it comes from the Greek word eleos. It means olive oil. Olive oil was literally a healing balm offered to people in this time. What does it look like to help offer olive oil, mercy to the wounds of the people in this world? What does it look like to offer eleos, mercy to a hurting world, healing the wounds that threaten to destroy us? Will you pray with me? God, we thank you so much for your eleos, for your mercy that is given to us. And we ask God for strength to receive that mercy. We ask you, God, to help us see ourselves as you see us, as people worthy and good and created to create solutions to problems, God. We ask you this morning to help us break out of icy, frozen tombs this morning, God, and give us a shovel to help protect the people of this world from the hurt and pain that so many are experiencing. And this morning, God, if there is one among us who has lived with the pain for too long, I pray this morning will be the morning that they accept your mercy, your grace, and your love. That we fully embrace it in our hearts and begin to live it out, shining your light and igniting your change